What do you think abandonment encompasses?
Well, abandonment encompasses the feeling that life itself has left you on a doorstep, which is a very natural feeling that we may encounter through many triggers. But it's someone going through a heartbreak, someone going through divorce, a loss. It's losing a job, losing your sense of purpose. It's maybe having one of your children be angry with you and you feel misunderstood. It's being alone and not being able to find a relationship. It's being stuck in patterns of self-sabotage. It's a feeling of vulnerability that may just be sort of a vague feeling or a feeling of insecurity in relationships that sabotages your relationships. It's many things depending on your life circumstance.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you for that comprehensive overview of what that might look like for people. So let's talk about stages of abandonment, since I know that's something that you talk about in your work. Could you go through those stages with us?
Yeah, SWIRL, they spell SWIRL. It's an acronym that stands for shattering, withdrawal, internalizing, rage, and lifting. And the first, when you feel an adult trigger, let's just say a breakup, that's a fairly typical trigger that makes us very emotionally, upset and disarranged. The first stage is when you feel shattered. It feels that your life is over. You're demoralized by it. Everything that you thought would happen isn't happening. You question yourself. You are shattered. It's as if you are a pane of glass and you've been thrown to the ground and you're fragmented all over the place. You're just shattered. And then the next phase is withdrawal. So that first you're shattered and then you start to realize that you want the thing that's missing. Maybe it's the person who broke up with you, or it's the job that you lost, or it's the friend who moved away. But you start yearning for that yearning for the object. So you're searching and seeking, your brain is doing this on its own for that connection that it can't find. And you go into withdrawal as if you're in heroin withdrawal, except instead of craving the drug, you're craving the connection with that person. And it's an awful feeling of pining and longing. And then the next phase is internalizing, where you are beating yourself up. You're taking the anger over being rejected against yourself and causing yourself to get very depressed. And, you start to doubt yourself. It's my fault. I'm not worthy. I'm not special enough. I'm not valuable enough. No, I'm not worth keeping. All of this self-doubt and these shame feelings come in. And during the internalizing phase is when the wound of abandonment can get infected, because it can damage your self-esteem and it can create some permanent scarring. And all of us have been a little scarred by previous abandonments from childhood all the way out. We're all kind of banged up by the different times that we've been through this. And then the fourth phase is rage. And that's when, you've been blaming yourself and beating yourself up and doubting yourself. But now you're saying, wait a minute, this isn't all my fault. And what about you? And so there's rage. So there's frustration, and it's kind of an agitated depression. And a lot of times, if you're an abandonment survivor who's had childhood issues with, insecurity in childhood with your parents or something, when you're in rage, you're afraid to express the rage directly to the abandoner because you don't want to lose a crumb of love. But you get very enraged at your friends who say things like, just let go and move forward. They don't understand. So you can displace the rage, that agitation that you feel. You can displace it onto people who are trying to help. And it's true that people don't really, they are not in your shoes. So they think it's easier to deal with than it really is. This stuff is very hard to deal with. And then the final phase is lifting. And you lift out of the abandonment, the intervals of lifting can increase as you go through this process. At first, you lift for 2 minutes because a friend made you laugh. And then after a while, a whole hour, you've been in so much pain over the abandonment, but a whole hour goes by where you're just kind of relaxing and reading a book or having a nice walk in your garden or something. So lifting can occur, but when you lift, if you don't know how to handle the feelings, you can lift and your feelings will not be intact. You'll be numb. You will not bring your feelings with you if you don't know how to handle them. And so abandonment can create a diminishment, and it can create sort of scar tissue and numbing in your emotional system. And if that happens, a very common pattern is you'll start being attracted only to unavailable people, because that you can feel, but just normal love, you're too numb to feel mutual love. So you need to keep chasing unavailable people. It's a very common pattern that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 5 phases, and you swirl through them their overlapping phases. You swirl through them within an hour, within a week, within a month, within a year. They're cycles within cycles. You swirl through them over and over again until you come out of the end of the funnel a changed person, hopefully changed for the better.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you so much for going through those, and also that reminding us that it's not necessarily linear and that you can go in and out of those cycles. So how long on average does this take people to go through? And also, can people get stuck in like one particular stage of abandonment?
Well, there's no normal length of time. If you are stuck in an abandonment that you could have had a very significant relationship, let's say, and it was 5 years ago, and you could still be struggling with a lot of the feelings. And what was the second part of your question? The getting stuck in one stage more than the other?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I think you already answered it, that there's no like timeline that most people follow or whatever. I was right. Like, how long does it take to ultimately get over it?
It's all normal, because the part of our personalities that are affected are something beyond our control. It's very involuntary. There's a lot we can do to help ourselves, but if we don't know those tools, it just sort of takes on a life of its own. Mm-hmm. And as far as, depending on your childhood or the nature of your relationship, you could get stuck in shattering and wind up in unstable. If you had a very shattering childhood, or if you had a lot of shattering experiences, you could wind up with an instability pattern. Or if your parents were cold and rejecting or critical, you could wind up internalizing a lot and have a self-esteem issue. And that could be the stage that you get stuck in the most. It depends on, what took place before it and what kind of vulnerabilities you have. That will dictate which one of those phases gives you the most trouble.
Right. Gotcha.